in the previous talk, we have talked about the full page cache. So, as you know that if you see that other talks like full page cache, we have implemented like a cache system. Or if you see other talk like if you have implemented a varnish or cache management, or what is the motive of all this thing actually? To improve the page load time, to improve the performance. So, good afternoon everyone. My name is Devansh and my talk is about traditional to turbocharge Bagisto's Octane transformation. So before continuing this thing, we need to focus about the Octane first. So what is Octane actually? So Laravel Octane is a first party package and it is designed to actually develop speed, efficiency and scalability of Laravel application. So it is actually maintained by Laravel. So basically it is a trusted application and easy to trusted application and easy to maintain. And second thing is support for Soul and Roadrunner. So Soul is basically a PHP extension and Roadrunner is a binary file. It is written in a Go file, Golang. So next I want to talk about why Octane matters for Bagisto. So it drives remarkable improvement in page load time. So actually it is very important if your page load time reduce and ensure a seamless experience, because faster page load time increase your shopping experience. And the second thing is when your traffic goes on and when your site is actually super fast, so scalability is a very important factor. And the third thing is form the foundation for optimizing Bagisto's performance. Now my next slide is application performance comparison versus traditional versus Octane. So here from the traditional, I want to say that it is a stateless server. From the stateless, I want to say that it is a Apache or an Nginx server. And from the Octane, I want to say that it is a stateful, not stateful, a partial stateful server, basically. So I want to focus on this thing. So what does the PHP traditional server actually do? For example, in your day-to-day life, you are using a traditional Apache server. So what actually you do? For example, if the request is received, then the process starts, then your code executed, then send the response and process stop. So what will happen? With every request, this cycle will repeat. And for example, if you hit the home page, every time this cycle will get received. So for example, if you are hitting a multiple request, this cycle will get again and again repeated. So my question is like, how many files are approximately included in a typical Laravel lifecycle? So basically, if I check this thing in a basic Laravel PHP, so in a basic Laravel, it's around 400 plus files are loaded in the stateless server. And in my Bagisto, I check the home page, it's around 1200 files get loaded. So you can assume that with each Apache, with each request, 1400 files get loaded. So how much input and write statements get written here? So next thing is we have a Octane powered. So what does Octane do? Actually, Octane uses in middle of things, then Octane uses Soul manager, which opens up the processes. And then it opens up the worker. For each worker depends upon your CPU cores. For example, if you are having a 4 CPU, then you will have then the 4 workers will get opened. And if you have multiple cores, it depends on CPU. For example, if you want to change the core, for example, if you want to change the number of workers, you can do it by a specific command, which I already mentioned in the Laravel documentation. So this worker will get started. And the next thing is, when each worker gets started, what will happen actually? So in the first phase, fresh Laravel instance gets created. And the second one is, it boosted all the services. And the third one is, register the Octane service in the application container. So what will happen is, this will actually, your Laravel application will get loaded in a memory for an entire period of a time. So just imagine your request not even hit the shop and your Laravel application is already ready. So if you are having a 4 worker, then 4 Laravel application instance will get created in that. So not even a single request is even reaches to the server and your Laravel application get created already. So next step is overcoming hurdles with Octane integration. So what are the hurdles we face during the Octane integration? So there are some set of guidelines provided by the Laravel. Like if you want to make your Laravel application Octane friendly, then you have to do this kind of thing so that it becomes Octane friendly. So we have tried to make our application Octane friendly as much as possible so that our third party owners also take example from this thing. So here is the thing. Actually, this is not written in the Bagisto code, but actually this is what is the issue with this code actually. If you see this thing, this is just a typical code, just an example. So if you see this code, actually, if you see that if you normally using a stateless server like Apache or Nginx or something, then these variables will not harm your server actually. But when it's come to a stateful server, like if your Octane servers actually run, then these global variables will get shared even across the request. So global variables will always get shared across the request. For example, if the case was hit, then this time count will return 1, then again 2 and 3. So for example, if your site is having a maximum amount of traffic, so then your system will get crash here. Because we have to avoid a memory leakage, and this causing memory leakage also. So this is actually the issue, that is a global state pollution and memory leakage. So these global states will shared actually in a different request. So try to avoid that global variable and try to minimize and not to use the global variables. The second thing is, this is the code snippet from our Bagisto code. So this is actually in our previous version we are using this kind of code snippet and we are using a static variable to hold the values for a specific request of a type. But in our Octane server, this actually behaving differently. So this actually behaving differently, and when we check the Laravel documentation, then Laravel says that try to avoid the static variables also as much as possible. So we followed all the standards provided by Laravel, and we have written all this kind of code from our code base properly. The next thing is best practices for Bagisto 2.0 with Laravel Octane. So as I already said that Laravel has provided this kind of instruction. So here is the first instruction which is provided, that container injection. So in this thing, what is happening that we are using a singleton, we are binding a single instance to the service class. So basically what will happen if you are using a normal server like Apache server, so this will not create any issue because you will get an instance and it is working properly. But when it comes to the Octane server, then your application might behave differently because you are having a stale version of your container instance. So try to avoid using the application container into the service class. Don't inject it into the container, directly into the constructor of the class. So to avoid this thing, the Laravel provided two sections. Either use the bind method to resolve this thing. So what does bind do? It will give you a fresh instance every time. So every worker will have a fresh instance here. Or if you still want to use a singleton, then you can use a callback function which is called a container get instance. What does this container get instance do? This will give you a current instance of the application. So you will have a current instance and a fresh instance which is provided by what you injected to here. The next thing is request injection. Same here, if you are using a singleton in a Apache server, then it will be working fine. But if you are using in an Octane server, then it will create an issue. So for that, either you can use the bind method, like for example, if you are having a request. So there are several times that your request maybe get old, or your request maybe you don't have a request, or your request get old. So your application totally might behave differently as across the server. So every time try to check that if you want a fresh instance, like if you every time you want to bind a fresh instance, you can use a bind method. If you still want to use a singleton, then you can use a callback method, as callback automatically resolves the current request provided by the current instance. Or Laravel also says that you can use a request helper. Request helper automatically resolve the current instance and current request. So in our Bagisto, mostly we have used the request helper everywhere to maintain the consistency. The next thing is, I already talked about, like, avoid global variable as much as possible, minimize the use of static variables, and try to avoid the memory leakage. And most importantly, how you can check to avoid the memory leakage? By always monitoring your application in a local environment. Try to monitor your application in local environment when you are working in a stateful environment like Octane every time. The next thing is, it is a benchmarking. I want to say that it is not a benchmarking, just a boot time, because if your application is actually Octane friendly, then it actually supports a 6,000 plus request, and mostly Laravel also showed that benchmarking here. So here I have shared a boot time for the without Octane. So without Octane it is a 189 ms, and with Octane it is a 76 ms. So it's around half. So even a single millisecond is very important for the application. So try to check that thing as much as possible. So here, last I want to conclude here that you might be needed an Octane or you might not need an Octane. That depends on you. For example, if performance is very critical and you are having a high traffic, then you might be need a Laravel Octane. If your existing setup is sufficient, you are having enough amount of server, then you might not need a Laravel Octane. But our Bagisto supports both, so you can use a Laravel Octane or you cannot. So that's your choice. Thank you so much.